Okay, so before I usually give my accessibility talks, I kind of run through a video real quick. It's from Apple. It's really, really powerful. So I want to show that real quick before we get started. So let's rock and roll.
People think that having a disability is a barrier. But that's not the way I see it. You can catch up with friends.
Ready?
You can capture a moment with your family.
One face, small face, focus lock.
And you can start the day bright and early. You can take a trip to somewhere new.
3 miles to the summit.
You can concentrate on every word of a story.
A bird began to sing. Jack opened his eyes.
You can take the long way home. Or edit a film like this one. When technology is designed for everyone, it lets anyone do what they love, including me.
It's pretty powerful stuff. So I also do another kind of intro with certain things I find in the accessibility, digital and non-digital accessibility world that I kind of like to showcase. So this right here, this is a tactile scanner. It was created by 6 engineers at MIT. And what this does is it translates written word into Braille with the use of an optical character recognition software. And it's really cool. And it also uses Microsoft's computer vision API, which is really sweet. So if you're into Microsoft products and their cognitive services, they offer this as one of their products. It's not technically digital accessibility, but it's accessibility nonetheless, and it's a win for accessibility all the way around. So thank you all for having me come out today. Thanks, Cerner, for bringing me here and to check out my talk. I can't see, low vision, A11y, and users. So thank you all for coming. So this is a good number right here. This is the percentage of people out there with disabilities. If you look at the numbers, you got 80 and 20. Those don't look like really big numbers, right? 20% of people. But if you think about it, 7 billion people around the world, give or take, 1.4 billion of them have some type of disability. When you look at it, a bigger number like that, that's a lot of people. 20 doesn't look big, but when you look at 1.4 billion, it's a lot of people. And so when I give this talk or I give other accessibility talks, I kind of like to cover this when you internalize it, right? I've worked at companies where, oh, well, none of our developers, none of the people we work with, they don't have disabilities. We don't have to worry about that. And I call BS all the time. If you think 20% of the population has some type of disability, you have to internalize that. 20% of the people you work with could have some type of disability. And they're not going to be out there saying, oh, yeah, I'm colorblind, or hey, I'm deaf in one ear. You know, they're not going to outright say things like that. But you have to keep it in mind. An example I always use, I work with developers who are colorblind. We've had to build pieces and widgets and components, different color reds that represent like pie charts, but no borders in between them. So when I'm sitting with my other developer, who's a backend dev, he'd tell me, Chris, I can't see the difference between these two pie pieces because they were reds, and he had a red-green color division deficiency. So we had to change the colors. I also work with a developer, an amazing developer. She's deaf in one ear. So she has trouble with captions and videos on the internet. That's her biggest struggle. So we always have to keep these things in mind. We're not just targeting everybody out there. You got to think about the people internally as well. So my name is Chris. I am a UI developer. I work for a company called United Shore. right outside of Detroit, Michigan. I am from Detroit. That's my Twitter, Salt and Burnham. Do we have any Supernatural fans in the house? If you can raise your hand, raise it. If not, just give me like a little nod. You can raise your hand. It's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm a Supernatural fanboy. I love Supernatural. I have posters and toys and action figures. I love it. Also, that's my website. You can check that out. I have a link to my Medium blog there. You can read some blog posts I write, little blurbs about me. But definitely, if you're going to take pictures, tweet them out. I love using stuff like that for my year in reviews, other different things like that, so please do that. I also host my own podcast. It's called Tales from the Script. It's a front-end focused podcast mixed with a little bit of horror. I'm a super huge horror fan, so if you have anything to say that is front-end focused, please come talk to me. If you want to be on the podcast, you've never been on a podcast, I'd love to have you on. You can check it out on Twitter. It's TalesFTScript or tftscript.com. So please come and talk to me. So I get questioned a lot on why do you care so much about accessibility, Chris? And the fact of the matter is, I kind of think about my mom. Now, my mom, she's aging. She's in her 60s. Her sight's going down. Her hearing's going down. Cognitive disabilities. She has trouble remembering things. She doesn't know how to use a computer. She still has a flip phone. Yes, she does. She still has a flip phone. She has trouble with these types of things. She has trouble with technology. If I can make an amazing, accessible user experience at the end of the day that works for her, I've done my job. And that's why I like accessibility so much. And there's not enough people out there in the industry talking about it. It's starting to gain more visibility, but not enough. So that's why I like going out there speaking. I speak around the world about accessibility, and it's something that everybody should care about. I forgot to change the slide around. I used to have a lot of intro slides, and I got some feedback from a conference talk I gave that we don't care about you, we care about your talk. So I cut out a bunch of intro slides. I just do it to show you that I'm human. But I'm also a Google developer expert. I do like putting this in there because that's a super huge accomplishment for me. So if you can raise your hand, raise it. Like I said, this is going to be really interactive. I'm going to crack some jokes. I hope everybody laughs. But if you can raise your hand, raise it. If not, no big deal. How many people have heard this before from somebody? I can't see that. Right? It's a lot of people. A lot of people say this. I was showing this to my mom the other day. She's like, I say that all the time. I'm like, well, I know. But what do they actually mean when they say I can't see that? Do they mean that they really just can't see it because of the color? Or maybe there's some disabled features? Do they have some type of low vision impairment that would hinder them from observing what's on the screen? And if they do have a low vision impairment, what can we do as people working on the web to aid them into having a great user experience? That's part of what I'm going to talk about today. So who has heard the term ALY or A11y? Anybody know what it means? What's the term for this? Right, exactly. You get the sticker. I don't have any stickers, but tweet it. I left my whole sticker bags at home. I have X-Core stickers, but I'll get into X-Core later. But tweet at me, DM me, and if you want stickers, I'll mail them to you. So that's what A11y stands for. Technically, that term right there is called a numeronym. Now, you've seen this out in the wild other places. I-18N, internationalization, that's a numeronym. You've seen localization, I-10N, that's a numeronym. And then you have A11y, ALY, that stands for accessibility. You take the first word, let me see if this can even work. Anybody see that? No, that's all right. You take the first word, you take the first letter, the last letter, and then you count the letters in between, you combine them, and then boom, you get A11y. That's the shorter version for accessibility, numeronym. So what is it? What is this thing called accessibility? Well, the definition for the W3, web accessibility means that people with disabilities can use the web. But I have a problem with this definition. This is an open web, correct? Yes, Chris, it's an open web, right? And an open web means an inclusive web, right? Yes, Chris, it's an inclusive web. And an inclusive web means web for all, right? Yeah, oh, there we go. I mean, I know it's after lunch. Lunch was really good, by the way. I like this definition a lot better. Web accessibility means that everyone can use the web. Every single person that uses the internet should be able to have a great experience whether they have a disability or not. Flat out, no questions asked. But we do have to pay close attention to users with disabilities. It's just part of the process. So this is another great quote that I like. It comes from the WebAIM website, webaim.org. The web is not a barrier to people with disabilities. It is the solution. That's kind of the key word right there, solution. It is our job as developers, designers, product owners, BAs, QAs, anybody that has their hand in a web experience, it is your responsibility to make sure you are crafting an accessible user experience. And believe it or not, that does not start with writing code. Where are my designers at? Front row, all right. It starts with design. Your designers have to understand accessibility. They have to be able to design these accessible experiences before you can start writing code. Colors, user flow, how the user is going to interact with things, what looks good, what doesn't look good. That's all in the design phase. That comes first. Then you can bake in accessibility in the code. So keeping that in mind, it is something that we always have to keep into consideration from the beginning. You don't wait till the end to bake in security. I mean, some people might. It's not the smartest thing to do. You don't do that with accessibility either. So this is a quote from me, another one. Accessibility is not a requirement. It is a must. You must care. You must think about these things before you do anything. That's just the way it goes. So when we talk about accessibility and users with disabilities, what are a couple of the first things that come to mind? Shout it out. What specifically about vision? Blindness. What else? Did y'all eat some good food or something for lunch? Come on, we got blindness, deafness. So that's the two things you always hear. Oh, you're blind. Oh, that sucks. Oh, you're deaf. Those are like the two most popular disabilities. But it's not true. Motor skills, yeah, but the two main ones are being blind and deaf. You hear that all the time. Oh, you're blind and deaf, whatever. But there's certain things that we have out there, like screen readers. And that's, those are for users that are blind, so and you can get that afforded by your operating systems. But it is definitely more complex than that. If I told you there were such things as braille machines, kind of like you saw earlier, that read output to a monitor, you'd be like, wow, dude, that's pretty sweet. We need to get one of those for here. Or there are such things as sip and puff machines that work on air pressure by blowing and sucking. If you combine that with accessible software, your user can now use your experience. Say if they have no motor skills, right? They're suffering from some type of mobility disability. And all the way they can only interact with their face or their mouth. Those are called sip and puffs. So those are pretty cool. Without those things, we wouldn't be able to have great user experiences for everybody. So we do have 5 main types of disabilities. The first one being hearing, which means conductive hearing loss, sensory neural hearing loss, and a combination of both of those. We have cognitive disabilities, verbal comprehension, math comprehension, reading, writing, mobility, broken hand, broken finger, arthritis, cerebral palsy, MS, vision, color vision deficiencies, field of view. Then we have temporary. And I kind of mixed the mobility and temporary in there, but broken hand, broken arm, right? Broken fingers. But one you might not be thinking about, how many, that was a good gyro I had for lunch. How many have a small child or maybe a newborn at home? Raise your hand if you can. One? Couple? Okay. I don't like to call it a disability. It's more of a short-term impairment, but a lot of people don't think about it when you're at home and you have a newborn and you're holding that child, right? And you have to work on the computer. You can't just put your kid down and start doing whatever you got to do. You got to think about things like that as well. So I kind of lumped that into temporary, short-term issues. But the one I'm going to talk today about is going to be vision, specifically low vision. So I have a 4-letter acronym I want everybody to memorize: sleep, breathe, eat. We should be basing all our development efforts around this. And these are the 4 main guiding principles of accessibility. And they are as follows. We have perceivable. Is the experience easily readable? Can I view the images? Can I use a screen reader? We have operable. Can I just use a keyboard? Are the interactions easy? Are there timers on certain actions that I have to be aware of? We have understandable. Do I understand the language that is being communicated to me? Are there supplemental representations for things I don't understand on the screen, like words and associated pictures, imagery, symbolism? And then we have robust. Can the experience be viewed across a wide range of technologies? Screen readers, braille machines, etc. But out of the 4 letters that make up that 4-letter acronym, the one that comes to low vision is perceivable. So we're going to talk a little bit about the perceivable part of poor. So poor vision and low vision are not the same. Poor vision can be corrected with glasses or contacts. Low vision is degenerative. You can't fix it. You can have surgery to prolong it, but it's not something that you can just fix with glasses or contacts. So let's talk about vision abilities and disabilities for a little bit. So users with full vision can make out things all around them, culturally speaking. They know the difference between streetlights, red, amber, and yellow, or red, amber, and green. They can make those colors out. They can read text, and they can view images. They can make sense of symbolic art and visual cues. It can also perceive colors. Now, users with visual disabilities on the other hand, they might not have that luxury. They might not be able to do all of that. There's other ways of communication for visually disabled users. One big one being audio format, which is usually afforded by a screen reader, or if it's built into the browser. So I came here to talk about low vision and accessibility, so we're going to start with color vision deficiencies or color blindness. You might encounter this out in the wild, may or may not. So first on the list is going to be color blindness, or color vision deficiency, CVD for short. So, what is it? It's a good question. If you're colorblind, does that mean that you only see in shades of gray? Not really. Color vision deficiency is the inability to distinguish certain shades of color. So what that means is there's certain colors that you just can't see, or there's colors out there that are representing another type of that spectrum, another type of color. So those colors are being replaced over the other colors. How many people out there are colorblind? Not here. I don't care to know. 1 in 12 men are affected by some type of color blindness. They experience some type of color blindness. Women, 1 in 200. That's a good number. Why do more men experience color blindness than women? Anybody know? You're on the right track. It's passed down from the mom. The gene is passed down from the mom. There's more men. Specifically in the UK, I read a study last year about population and color vision deficiencies in the UK. And come to find out, there's more men in the UK, therefore the population of people, there's more people with color blindness than there are without. 94% of men, 6% of women out in the wild are experiencing some type of color vision deficiency. So thanks, Mom. I appreciate that. I am not colorblind, however, but if I was, she'd get a card, she'd get flowers. I appreciate it. So we have a few different types of color vision deficiencies. We have normal, which is not, that's like your normal vision, where you can see all shades of color. We have deuteranopia. And deuteranopia is a reduced sensitivity to green light and is the most common type of color vision deficiency. We have protanopia, which is a reduced sensitivity to red light. And last, but technically not least, we have tritanopia, which is a reduced sensitivity to blue light, and it's extremely rare. But we do have one more type of color vision deficiency out there in the wild. Anybody think what it could be? Nothing? You're on the right track. How many people are up there? Nothing? We got nothing? Monochromatic. Monochromatic is the last type of color vision deficiency out there in the real world. 1 in 33,000 people experience monochromatic color vision deficiency. Now, yes, that is shades of gray. That's what you do see. So we have another type of low vision disability, and it's called visual acuity. Now, when I say the words visual acuity, what comes to mind? I know I am not the nerdiest person in this building right now. Pop culture. Think of pop culture in movies. No, I'm looking for a specific line from a movie. Visual acuity. Did I hear it? Come on, you guys are killing me here. Movie. Let's think movies. Movies. Pop culture movies. 93, 94, this movie hit the theaters. Jurassic Park! His visual acuity is based on movement. He'll lose you if you don't move. You get a sticker. Hit me up on Twitter, I'll give you a sticker. But this is not the type of visual acuity I'm talking about. This is based off of movement. What I'm talking about is not based off of movement. And we all know what happens when you move in front of a T-Rex, right? That happens. You end up like Gennaro. It's not a good look. I sure wouldn't want to go out that way. I doubt anybody else in this room would also want to go out that way either. So if you ever see a T-Rex out there, don't move. But I digress. So what is it? What is visual acuity? Another great question. How many have seen a chart like this? Pretty much all of us. We're all wearing, I have glasses, so of course I've seen it. So this is a visual acuity distance chart, or it's called a Snellen chart. And the Snellen chart is used to determine the clarity of your vision at 20 feet. How many in here have 20/20 vision that they know of? Are you sure you have 20/20 vision? You know 20/20 vision doesn't mean you have perfect vision, right? Yeah? Nodding your head, okay. Yeah, 20/20 doesn't mean you have perfect vision. It just means you can see clearly at 20 feet. There are other things that make up perfect vision. One of them being 20/20. One of them being having normal color vision. Being able to have contrast. Field of vision. Everything has to be perfect. You actually have to check off each of the pieces to your eye vision and the health of your eyes in order to have perfect vision. So I thought, I was younger, I had 20/20 vision. I'm like, yes, sweet, I got 20/20 vision. My eyesight's better than yours. But it might not be. I had eye surgery when I was a kid. So I may or may not have 20/20 vision. Something to keep in mind when somebody says they have 20/20 vision. I got perfect vision. Call them out. Like, no, you don't. You don't have perfect vision, you liar. So there's a few different types of visual acuity that we recognize out in the wild today. We have 3 different types that I'm going to talk about. Now, I should have said this from the beginning. I am a developer. I'm not an optometrist. I'm not an ophthalmologist. So don't quote me with medical stuff. Do we have any medical people working in the building? We can get some people up here and thinking, oh yeah, this is what this does. So we have spatial acuity. And what spatial acuity means is that you can make out 2 points in space, A to B, and there's a direct line. I can see you from here to here, I can make that out. Spatial acuity. From here to that white F-150, spatial acuity. We have temporal acuity. And what temporal acuity is, you can distinguish visual elements in time. Perfect example, TV, movies, video games. So this is a fun fact, and I want everybody to tweet this out. Take a note. In the early days of motion pictures, the projector wasn't fast enough to keep up with the eye to see a continuous picture. So therefore, the person watching the picture saw the flicker in the film, and because of that, movies became known as flicks. Did you know that? Right? That's pretty dope. And I had to go with Nosferatu in the background, right? Because horror, the original vampire. Horror fans? Oh, a couple. Harry Potter fans. Yeah, okay. Jurassic Park fans. Nobody's going to raise their hand. Cool. Yeah, so that's pretty sweet. We have spectral acuity. And what spectral acuity is, it's the ability to distinguish differences in wavelength, like types of light. Now, 2 examples of this are photographers that work in a dark room. Anybody into photography? Anybody work in a dark room? Why is it red? Your eye can work better in red light. You can see the pictures a lot crisper. The verbiage, if there's any wording, you can see that a lot crisper. Another example, submarines. When stuff hits the fan, and even not if stuff hits the fan, everything goes black and all the red lights turn out in all the hallways. The reason that happens is so that the people on the sub can navigate around and see more clearly, believe it or not. So they're not tripping on stuff and hitting pipes and blasting their head off of things, low-hanging stuff. So those are the 2 examples I like to use when I talk about spectral acuity out in the wild. Acuity is science. Now, I can go down a rabbit hole probably with the whole explanation of acuity. but I couldn't tell you the difference between a rod and a cone and how that turns light into pictures, and that's for another day. So let's move on. We have contrast sensitivity, and that's very, very important. So when we talk about color contrast, we're talking about a person being able to distinguish something in the background from the foreground from the background, kind of like colors. Well, it is colors. How many have been in a situation like this? Do we have an up north here? It's like being from Michigan, like I go up north, right? Is there an up north that way, woods and back roads? I'm sure everybody has an up north. So this could be a situation that you've been in. You've been on a country road, you've been driving up north, there's no lights. The only lights are from your headlights, or you're driving down maybe a dark road in the city with barely any lights. And out of nowhere, you see someone or something standing on the side of the road. But you didn't see that someone or something until you got right up on it. That could mean you have bad color contrast at night. Now, this example is a little bit in depth than talking about contrast on the web, but the principle is still the same. If the contrast is bad, you could be hurting yourself, or you could be hurting somebody else. Just like a web experience, if the color contrast of that experience does not meet the web content accessibility guidelines, then you could really screw things up. And it might make you feel like that. You'll be sad that you weren't thinking about accessible user experiences from the beginning. And on top of that, you could be hurting your user. And we're all here to advocate for the user. You could also hurt your company with a thing I call a lawsuit. That's kind of a big deal nowadays. These are some crazy numbers. This is from the Sayforth Shaw website. It's a chart. Oh, of course it's a chart. 2017 website accessibility lawsuit recap. A tough year for business. I don't know why this does work. So you can see we have. Oh no, that's not what I wanted, Mr. T. You're not that cool. It works here. There we go. So we have a few states here. We got Puerto Rico. Look at that number at the bottom. 814 federal website lawsuits in 1 year, just from these states in Puerto Rico alone. That is a huge number. It's almost 2.5 a day for a whole year. It blows my mind. It literally does blow my mind. And the two biggest ones, we have Florida and New York with the most. I didn't understand why. I reached out to a product owner. I was showing a PO at work, these numbers, a few months ago. Might have been last year. And I said, George, I'll call him George, why are these numbers so big? He's also colorblind, by the way. Why do you think Florida had the most federal website lawsuits in 1 year? Why do you think that is? Aging population. I didn't put two and two together until he told me that. He said, Chris, where do people go when they retire? They go down south, especially being in the north, because our winters are brutal. They go to Florida to retire. Florida is a state of an aging population. It kind of makes sense. Okay, that makes sense, George. But what about New York? Nobody retires and goes to New York, right? Why do you think New York has such a big number? Say it again? Older workforce? Possibly. What else? What was that? More regulation. Maybe. But there's another one I'm thinking of. So bigger population. Yep. Bigger population. Bigger population per space, I guess you could say, right? That makes total sense. Now, I know what you're going to say, but California is way bigger than New York, Chris. Doesn't mean there's more population in California, though, which there may or may not be. But if you think about it, you might have a really big population in a smaller spot, in a small population in a huge area. So it kind of makes sense. And like Mr. T says, I pity the fool who doesn't think about accessibility from the beginning. That's actually me, if you couldn't tell. It was Mr. T, I swear. See, the quote says Mr. T. Wasn't me. So what is good color contrast? What makes good color contrast? In general, is any color that can bounce off of one another. Kind of like my slides. Black text on a white background. Easily discernible, easily readable. It pops. You can read it clearly. So according to the W3C working draft, which is I think it's 2.1, it might be a rec now, the minimum color contrast ratio to meet level AA requirements is 4.5 to 1. There's 3 levels of conformance. You have level A, single A, which you should automatically just hit. You don't have to do a whole lot of work to hit level A. You have level AA, which is a little bit more that you can do. You should always try to strive and hit AA, no matter what. And you have AAA. AAA you'll never hit. It's almost literally impossible. And accessibility consultants out there will tell you the same thing I'm telling you. If you were to try to hit AAA, let's say you have a video on your website, and you're already at AA, fine and dandy, and somebody says, let's do AAA. Okay, well, we can try, but we're going to need somebody that can do sign language, because that has to accompany that video. We're going to need captions, transcripts, all the above. That costs money. That costs resources. A lot of companies don't want to put in for that. Government institutions, they kind of have to hit Federal 508 and AAA. Some financial institutions as well, but you really don't see it too much out in the wild. So that's the 3 levels. WCAG 2.1 says 4.51 for level AA. So, you think this passes? Yes or no? We got some green text up there, 1.79 to 1. We have some gray, light gray, 1.5 to 1 on a white background. You think it passes? No. Does not pass at all. You stare at that body copy long enough, it starts to bleed into the background. It's really hard to see. What about this? That main heading is 9.9 to 1. We got 19.56 and a 12.94. Does that pass? Sure does. Passes AA, it passes AAA. That is an example of good high color contrast. Now, you wouldn't use these actual colors in production, just an example. But I'll tell you what, when I started building web pages back in the day, black background, lime green text, purple, that was the way to do it. Marquees, blink tags. Marquee still works, by the way. I have a code pen. You can check that out. It still works. But the blink tag doesn't work. I think there's like a polyfill now out there to like bring it back in. I think the newer versions of Chrome are going to start releasing like a polyfill for the blink tag because people love their blink tag. I used to back in the day. So, the last type that I'm going to talk about is field of vision. And this is a really interesting one. And I'd like to show this off. Has anybody heard of 2 blind brothers? So it's 2 brothers, and they make clothing, and they give back to the blind, blind research, stuff like that. But in the corner over here, there's a little simulator. These 2 brothers experience Stargardt's disease. Stargardt's disease is a macular degenerative eye disorder. That's how they see their experiences all the time. Not just the web, everywhere. It's really powerful stuff. A QA I work with, who I've gotten into accessibility, she actually showed me this, and she said, you should definitely talk about this and show this in your conference talks when you give your talks on accessibility. So like, yeah, that's sweet, I'm going to do it. It kind of hits the nail home with seeing kind of how somebody else would see. And there's other plugins out there. There's a plugin called Funkify that you can use in Chrome that kind of does the same thing. You can choose like the persona and do it that way. But this is really, really cool. The two brothers, like I said, they experienced Stargardt's disease. All the money and the financial stuff that they make goes back into blind research. So, what is field of vision? Field of vision is the eye, or is the area that can be seen when the eyes are in a fixed position. So if I'm standing straight and I'm looking straight ahead, my field of vision in the center point is right over there by that window. That's what field of vision is. As you can see, that's kind of standing, if you were to be standing straight up, your fixation point is your line of sight. Your field of vision is your central, peripheral, lower peripheral, and everything in between. That's your field of vision. You also have to have perfect field of vision to have perfect vision. It's one of those things with the 20/20. So we have three types of field of vision impairments that we experience out there. We have central, so this is kind of like two blind brothers, where you can't see anything in the middle. You can only see the things around. We have peripheral, so it's almost like tunnel vision. You can only see directly in the middle, and you can't see anything on the outside. And then we have other, and it's called other because it's kind of a mix. It's spotty. You pinpoint it just to peripheral or central. And it could be worse, it could be, not as worse. But these are things we got to think about. So we have a problem. We have a big problem on our hands here. Now that we know there's different types of low vision, not just blindness, we can focus on it. No pun intended. Shameless plug, I also give an accessibility talk on focus and CSS. But it's a big problem. It's something we should all care about. So I'm going to only talk about a few of the problems that we have out there. I could sit up here and talk about this all day, if I could. But I only have probably about 17-ish minutes left, so I suggest actually going to the spec and reading it if you want to find out more about it. It's actually, what is this, 2.0? Yeah. But all of it applies to 2.1 as well. 2.1 is the newest spec that's out. So everything that's in 2.0 does also apply to 2.1. First on the list of the problems, contrasting colors. All too many times the wrong colors are used, believe it or not. They might look cool, but functionally, they don't work. How many are familiar with Jakob Nielsen's design principles? One of them being, put yourself in the user's shoes. Paraphrase, right? You can design stuff all day long. You can develop stuff all day long that you think is bomb, but your users might not. Right? Like so when I was talking about when I started when I was younger, black backgrounds, small text in purple and like lime green. Everything was centered. We didn't have CSS. We didn't have JavaScript. That was the life. That was cool back then. You can't get away with stuff like that nowadays. Got to keep colors in mind. This is from a local, This is from a local company. It's their navigation. You can see over here that it fails AA and it fails AAA for the color contrast ratio because of the size of the content, the size of the text. Now, if this was large text, it passes AA. There's a specific threshold, depending if it's small text or large text, with whether or not it'll pass or not. But it does fail AAA. So that's not good. We have colors that just don't work at all. I've heard this from other developers I work with. So for instance, let's take my awesome legend. It really doesn't mean anything, but we have red, green, blue, yellow, and purple. And those colors represent something. Red represents waiting, green represents pushed, blue in progress, yellow denied, purple means passed. But it's up to you to memorize those colors and what they mean. That's hard for me to do. A user that's colorblind might have a big problem with a system like this, especially if they're told to change a status from one color to the next. If they can't make out that color and they don't have the representation of what that color is, you're going to have a big problem on your hand. They might not know what red is or what blue is. They've never known. You can't expect them to know either. Even something like this. What if you have a developer or somebody on your floor or your organization that is experiencing a monochromatic color vision deficiency? To tell you the truth, I forgot where blue was just standing here. Did anybody memorize those colors? If you did, you're a genius. I don't know what colors are what, to be completely honest. And I've given this talk a handful of times. I still don't know which color is what. It can cause a huge problem. Things we have to think about. Everybody. So, talking about colors and color contrast leads me to my next problem, our next problem. Communication through colors. Do not communicate through colors. I don't care how sweet that magenta looks. It means nothing to a user that is experiencing a color vision deficiency. We as web workers cannot communicate through the use of color. This poses a huge problem, like I described in the last slide. If you're going to use colors to differentiate between things, use some type of visual distinction as well. We have icons and symbols. They can add great value because, for the most part, they're universal. We have a thumbs up. Using iconography helps to communicate things better than colors does. You could use emoji if you're feeling a little crazy. Thumbs up for something that's good. Thumbs down for a meh, not so good. A warning that something could be broke or something is in the process of being fixed. And then we have this one for things like, oh shit. Use that for when you're putting out fires, when everything kind of blows up in your face. Disabling zoom, that's a big problem. Don't do that. Please don't do that. What if the user can't see small text on a mobile device and you disable zoom? What if they want to zoom into an image to see more detail and you disabled zoom? By restricting the user to a fixed state on a mobile device, they might not be able to have that full experience that you intended, that your organization intended, or that you're trying to deliver. So if you see something like this, remove it. This kind of takes away the scaling, and it restricts the zoom. By removing that, the user will be able to zoom again back on their mobile device. So who knew poor line height was a problem? Poor line height's a big problem. It plays a big part in an accessible experience. So this is an example of no line height on 3 paragraphs. Now think about it. What if the zoom was disabled? There was no line height, kind of like this, and the color contrast wasn't great. So let's take a light gray and throw it on that white background. And to top it all off, you wanted your users to view it only on a mobile device. That would be pretty much impossible because accessibility wasn't thought of from the beginning. Here's another example. Same 3 paragraphs, but they have some line height. Clearly, this is way better than the no line height experience. Now, even if zoom were enabled, so they could zoom, but the color contrast still wasn't that great, Maybe you bumped up a couple shades of gray. This wouldn't be impossible to read on a mobile device. That kind of always goes back to not disabling the zoom. So when you're building out these experiences, when you're building out copy, make sure you take line height into consideration. We have poor typography. Now, I shouldn't have to give an example, but everybody shouted out when they could think of the worst case use of poor typography. Comic Sans. Don't use Comic Sans. But there's a star there, and there's a star there for a reason. I'm going to talk about that. Comic Sans is a bad use of typography. We have conflicting typography. This is also bad. Don't mix your typefaces and your fonts together. Don't mix serifs and sans serifs and cursive fonts and multiple fonts. It's not good for anybody. 2, 3 at the most. Even if you don't experience some type of disability, just for the web in general, don't do it. It's not a good look. So we do have a solution. We have a few solutions. There's ways of fixing these things. Better yet, there's ways that we can make sure we don't fall into a non-accessible rabbit hole. We can test colors and do audits with a tool like this. This is Wave by WebAIM. You can also install it as a Chrome extension. It's on their website. This is on their website at the bottom, webaim.org. It'll run accessibility audit on whatever URL that you type into the input or you pass to it. Like I said, there's also a Chrome extension for that. There's also a Chrome extension called Spectrum that I might show. I showed it a little bit earlier. You can also get that in the Chrome store. The way Spectrum works is that it runs color vision deficiency simulations on your experiences. So you can see what it's like for a user with deuteranopia or protanopia, tritanopia. You can see the colors they see. So I love Amazon. Don't get me wrong. I just wanted to show, or see how many URLs I could find that had like a bunch of errors on them and stuff. But this is Wave over here. It kind of gives you the errors. Errors, alerts, features, stuff you did right, stuff you did wrong. This is another one of my favorite tools. I use it. I kind of consider myself an unofficial brand ambassador for DQ. DQ is an accessibility consulting company. They're based out of Ann Arbor, a little west of where I'm at. And they make accessible software. Xcore 3.0 being something that they make. It's a testing framework, so you can put it in your end-to-end testing. It's really cool. They have browser extensions, Chrome and Firefox, Xcore. You can run audits using that. So this is Xcore right here, and it kind of breaks down the violations, what needs review. You can inspect the nodes, so it'll open up your dev tools and show you where the problem is. You can highlight on the screen where the problem is. You can step through each one of the violations. So I use that as my primary testing tool at work. Like I said, you can also run it in end-to-end testing frameworks, so Mocha, Jasmine, Selenium, Phantom.js, and this will run accessibility audits on your stuff. So this is kind of how it runs in the CLI. There's a terminal application as well. Wilco Fierce, who also works for DQ, he built the Xcore CLI. I think I ran Amazon in here. You can run this in your terminal if you like playing around in the terminal. And this will take a minute, but it should return errors. It's happening, trust me. I did it myself. There we go. So, 27 accessibility issues detected. So it kind of breaks it down and shows you what those errors are. Only bad thing is it only will catch 20 to 50% of those errors. If you want complete coverage, manual testing is the way to go. Always manual test your experience. And if you're going to use a screen reader, make sure you shut your screen off. How many screen reader users out there have the screen on while they got the screen reader going? Think about it. Cover it up. You're reading on the screen what the screen is telling you. You really want to test it, cover that screen up and try and use a screen reader. So this was an application that we just released a couple months ago. It's called findamortgagebroker.com. My company, we are the #1 wholesale mortgage lending company in the United States. This is kind of an application to find brokers in your area if you want to work with a broker to purchase your house. I worked on 99% of the accessibility for it. So when it came back with 0 violations, I was stoked. I was super happy because I did a lot of that work. The first application that we've released from United Shore that was completely accessible to the public, and that was a huge win for accessibility and a huge win for our company. Woohoo! 0 violations. There's also integration in Google Lighthouse. I don't know if anybody use Lighthouse for audits and testing, performance testing, stuff like that. Lighthouse, you can run audits on your experiences. You can run an accessibility audit. You can run a performance audit, SEO, stuff like that. This uses AXCore 3.0 under the hood, so it's using DQ's product for that accessibility audit, which is really cool. You have the accessibility developer tools. They're okay. They're not as robust as AXCore. I would suggest using AXCore. I did have AXCore stickers. I don't have them. They're at home. DM me if you want one. That's what it looks like right here, AXCore. So that's the accessibility dev tools. Kind of gives you the readings of the errors, things that are good, things that you could fix, warnings. Choose readable typography. Kind of self-explanatory. Comic Sans, no. Arial, yes. But the reason for the star in the previous slide is because there's a link between typography and dyslexia, believe it or not. Dyslexic users can read slanted typography a lot easier than straight up and down, like Comic Sans, or some italicized type of typeface. It's a lot easier for them to read. So it's not too bad, but also kind of keep that in mind. Arial was also on the list. I don't know why it was on the list, but both of these fonts, they have their pros and cons when it comes to the web and accessibility. So keep stuff like that in mind as well. Enable Zoom by default. Please, please do not hijack your user's Zoom. They need it. This was an example of findamortgagebroker.com on mobile. Completely accessible, able to be zoomed in red. We didn't hijack the user's Zoom. There's a lot of experiences out there where the Zoom gets hijacked. And at that point, I don't even want to use your experience at all, your website. It's dead to me. I don't need it. So don't hijack the user's Zoom, please. So I do have some takeaways for everybody today while I wrap up. Use colors that work. Make sure you check those colors against some type of color contrast checker. I wrote a blog post about the color contrast checker built into the newer version of the DevTools in Chrome. Really good to check that out. You can also take a couple of your colors. Leah Veru, she made an awesome contrast ratio checker. You can put them into foreground and background, see where you end up. Choose your colors like that. Run your websites through a testing and audit tool like AXCore. Run it through the audit tool using Lighthouse. You'll get a score back. You want to be in the green? You want to be at 100. You might not, but as long as you're in the green, I say above 94, you're golden. So don't forget to do that. Choose proper typography. Think about what works, what users want to see, what are accessible typefaces that are out there. Leave Zoom alone. I can't stress that enough. Do not hijack the user's Zoom. I'm sure you're sick of me saying that. And before I officially end, I want to leave you with a quote from my friend, front-end accessibility engineer, Marcy Sutton. She works at DQ. She builds a lot of AXCore. Every little bit of accessibility you contribute is so appreciated and so needed. I have some resources and credits. If anybody wants to take a picture of that, they can go through and read more about accessibility and the specs and stuff like that. That's my name. That's my Twitter. Those are the slides. That's my time. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for letting me be here.